Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are Propelled by Plants.
Today we bring to you episode 295, Undo It, How Simple Lifestyle Changes Can Reverse Most Chronic Diseases with Dr. Dean Ornish.
In this episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk to Dr. Dean Ornish. He is the pristine innovator of lifestyle medicine, and he's so well known in the plant-based community and in wellness overall. And what we get into at the beginning is just living in happiness. And there was a time where he wasn't living in happiness. In fact, he almost took his life. And it's so sad and scary to think about that in general. But the fact that he was able to overcome that and do the research that he was able to do and have the influence on the plant-based community that he was able to have is just amazing. And to think that we would have lost that had we lost him. We're so glad that he was there. The podcast that we recorded with him is just, it's so deep and on another level. And we really talk about love and connection. And what we really did enjoy also was talking about, disease prevention, as we love talking about so much, but also grassroots, how to influence the younger generations to stick with this lifestyle long term so that they end up so much healthier than they are expected to be these days. And
I think my favorite part was that he was so real with us. First of all, he was very honest, and he spoke to us by name and asked about our story, and we shared a lot of great details with him. But I love that he brought up the whole penis test.
The penis test.
And if you want to hear more about that, you're going to have to listen to the episode, but it's pretty awesome. We talk about making choices in life that lead to making big change, and that's what his whole book, Undo It, really talks about. I mean, he talks about eat well, move more, stress less, and love more.
You got it right.
Yeah, and those are four huge things. And for those of you that don't know Dr. Ornish, he's the founder and president of the nonprofit Preventative Medicine Research Institute, clinical professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. And he's also the author of 6 other books that were all national bestsellers. He's received so many honors, and some of them include being the Outstanding Young Alumnus Award from the University of Texas, National Public Health Hero Award from the University of California, Berkeley. He was also recognized as a Time 100 Innovator by Life magazine as one of the 50 most influential members of his generation, by People magazine as one of the most interesting people of the year, and by Forbes magazine as one of the world's 7 most powerful teachers. And wow, man, this episode...
Just to get one of those would be an honor.
But he taught a lot. He talks a lot about incredible information here. And for those of you listening, you're going to want to share this episode with the people you love, because this one is certainly going to make a huge impact.
And listen for the penis test.
Want to go plant-based without the worry of what to eat to stay healthy, even if you can't find the time to do the research?
Don't worry. Here at Plant Trainers, we have you covered. If you're looking to up your athletic game and start training for a race and make sure you know exactly what to eat, Adam can solve your dilemmas and train you to the top of your game.
If you're trying to find the time to batch cook, figure out what to make to be sure you're covering all your nutritional bases, and relieve anxiety with innovative stress techniques, Shoshana can get you feeling confident and in control.
So basically what we're saying is send us an email to info@planttrainers.com and we'll hop on the phone with you. For you, our amazing listeners, this is a complimentary call to get to know you better, see what your goals are, and let you know how we can help. No pressure, but a real connection.
What do you have to lose? A few pounds or less stress? Let's do this. Contact us at info@planttrainers.com. And now for a moment of gratitude.
The other day, our children had the opportunity to dress up as anything they wanted for school, and our son chose broccoli, and it's his favorite vegetable. He took out all of his green clothes. He asked me to buy him some green spray-in hair dye, and we did. And it's just incredible to see how he's embracing all foods, and it's wonderful.
The other day, Jordan came to me and said, "I have something I want you to do. Come up to my room." And I said, okay. And I went up, and on the floor, she had all these papers of different types of masks laid out, and she wanted to spend time coloring them and cutting them out and making masks with me, which was kind of fun. And I'm just grateful for that opportunity to hang out.
Dr. Dean Ornish himself, you're here. Thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers podcast.
Oh, I'm delighted and honored to be here. And, to me, awareness is the first step in healing. And by allowing me to be on your show and reaching so many people with information that can hopefully transform their lives, I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you. You knew exactly what to do. You got that moment of gratitude, and we're so grateful that you're here today. You are definitely one of the four fathers or five fathers, I don't know how, as many as you want to count, of plant-based nutrition and this whole movement and really helping people heal and feel better. So it's a humbling moment to have you on, and we're very grateful.
Thank you.
Certainly an honor to have you here, and we'd love to know, for the people that haven't met you yet or seen some of your work, maybe you could just explain to us a little bit. I know it's a big background, but how did you go from vegetarian into the plant-based, whole food plant-based world?
Well, gosh, let's see. Long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, when I was a freshman in college, I got suicidally and profoundly depressed. And it's a long story, which I wrote about in a couple of my earlier books, but I ended up getting a horrible case of infectious mononucleosis, and I didn't even have the energy to kill myself. So my parents came and saw what a wreck I was, and I went home to Dallas to, as crazy as it sounds, get strong enough to kill myself. And meanwhile, my older sister had really benefited from studying with this was in Dallas in 1972, had been benefited from studying with an ecumenical spiritual teacher named Swami Satchidananda. And so my parents decided to have a cocktail party for the Swami in our home in Dallas, which was pretty weird back in today even in Dallas it'd be pretty weird, but especially, in 1972. And so there's an old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and that was certainly true for me. And so in walks this guy that looks like Central Casting's idea of what a Swami should look like, archetypal long white beard and saffron robes and so on. And he gave a satsang, a lecture in our living room, and he began by saying, nothing can bring you lasting happiness, which I'd already figured out, which is why I was about ready to do myself in. But I thought, he's glowing and I'm, miserable. What am I missing here? And he went on to say what probably sounds like a New Age cliche, but it just turned my life around, which was that nothing can bring you lasting happiness, but that it's our nature to be happy and healthy. And not being mindful of that, we often run after so many things that our culture, and particularly the advertising industry, teaches us will bring you happiness. And once you set up that view of the world that you have to get your health and your well-being and your peace of mind from outside you, what he taught me was that no matter how it turns out, you're generally going to feel bad, because until you get it, you feel stressed, and then the stakes go way up. If someone else gets it and you don't, then it's, reinforces that we live in this misperception, that we live in this kind of zero-sum game, hyper-competitive world, that dog-eat-dog world. The more you get, the less there is for me, and so on. But even if you get it, it's very seductive in the moment, because it's like, I got it, it's mine. But it doesn't last. It's often followed by either now what, it's never enough. One patient many years ago said, I can't even enjoy the view from the mountain I've climbed. I'm already looking over the next one. Or if it's not so what, if it's not now what, it's so what, which is a big deal. It doesn't really provide the lasting meaning that I thought it would. And so the letdown that comes from accomplishing the goal is often so great. People often say they've got, 10 projects going at the same time, so they don't have to deal with that feeling. So what he taught me was that, and the reason why we call the book Undo It is because, among other things, he liked to make puns. People would say, what are you, a Hindu? He'd say, no, I'm an undu, And the idea is that all these various spiritual techniques, including meditation and so on, don't bring you a sense of health and well-being, but rather they simply help us to quiet down our mind and bodies enough to experience that it's already there. That's our natural state, that our natural state is to be at ease, and when we disturb that, we literally become diseased. And so I said, okay, well, let me try this weird stuff. I can always kill myself. I'll move that down to plan B, And so he said, if you eat a plant-based diet and meditate and exercise and love more, then that'll really transform your life. And that the experience of suffering can be a doorway for real personal transformation. So I thought, okay, let me give that a try. And so having grown up in Texas, eating meat 3 or 4 or 5 times a day, it was a big change in my lifestyle. And I did it, and I got these glimpses of what it felt like to be peaceful, and it turned my life around. And I was able to go back to work, and just like I realized that I could take all the meaning out of life, which is why I was so despondent. Who cares? No, so what? Big deal. Nothing matters. Why bother and all that. I realized that I can imbue my life, my choices with meaning. When I realized that choosing to eat a plant-based diet, for example, is good for me, helped me not disturb my inner peace, but also I later learned is good for the planet. More global warming is caused by livestock consumption than all forms of transportation combined. That it helps feed the hungry. It takes 10 to 14 times more resources to make a pound of meat-based protein than plant-based protein. And so I thought, okay, and then later when I went to medical school, and then I went back to school, did really well. And before I couldn't read a headline on a newspaper and tell you 5 minutes later what it said. And then I went back, and when I was more inwardly defined, the paradox was I graduated first in my class, gave the commencement address, got into medical school, all the things because I didn't have the anxiety that came with thinking I had to do these things in order to be peaceful and happy and healthy and to be lovable. So in medical school, I was learning how to do bypass surgery with Michael DeBakey, the heart surgeon, and we cut people open, and they'd go home. He'd tell them they were cured, who had heart disease, and bypass their blocked arteries. He was one of the inventors of the operation. And then they'd go home, and more often than not, they would do all the things that had caused the problem in the first place. Eat junk food and not manage stress, not exercise. Their bypasses would clog up in many cases. We'd cut them open again. I said, this is a real metaphor for not treating the cause of a problem, that we're literally bypassing it. And so I wondered, what is the cause and what are the causes and what can we do about it? So I went to these things called libraries, which people don't know about anymore, and these things called medical journals, and began to find that in dogs and cats and pigs and rabbits and monkeys, they would get heart disease if they stressed them or if they put them on a typical American diet or made them socially isolated, and you could reverse that if you changed that. I said, why should people be any different? And everybody thought that was a crazy idea. So I took off a year, this was in 1977, between my second and third years of medical school to see what would happen. Did a pilot study of 10 people, and they got better. 8 of the 10 showed they actually could reverse their heart disease. And that was the first time it was shown in a scientific study that you could actually reverse heart disease by simply changing lifestyle. And so that got me into doing the last 40 years of research, finding that these same lifestyle changes that can reverse heart disease, can reverse early stage prostate cancer in many patients, can reverse type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. We're doing the first randomized controlled trial now to see if these same lifestyle changes can reverse early stage Alzheimer's disease. We did a study with Craig Venter, published with Craig Venter, that when you change your diet and lifestyle, it changes your genes, and over 500 genes were changed in just 3 months, turning on the good genes to keep us healthy, turning off the genes that cause all these different conditions. We did a study with Elizabeth Blackburn, who got the Nobel Prize for discovering telomeres, the ends of our chromosomes that regulate how long we live. And as we get older, our telomeres get shorter, and as our telomeres get shorter, the risk of premature death from pretty much everything goes up correspondingly. We found for the first time that we could actually lengthen telomeres. And when we published in the Lancet, the Lancet editors sent out a press release worldwide that called it Reversing Aging at a Cellular Level. And so the more diseases we study and the more underlying mechanisms we look at, the more reasons we have to explain why these simple changes are so powerful and how quickly you can get better in ways we can actually measure, as well as those you can experience.
I used to teach at an old age home where I would go in and we would do a little bit of chair yoga and some meditation. And I taught your works on telomeres, and they found it so fascinating that I think that people get to a certain age and they think, oh, well, I'm 70 years old, so everybody starts to forget things at 70 years old, or everybody has heart disease at 70 years old. But, when you've encompassed this whole idea of lifestyle medicine, and that it's not just what you eat, or it's not just that you exercise, and it's not just that you meditate, it's not just how you surround yourself in parts of life that you love being in with people who you love being in, that there is a healthier society that can really thrive, and we don't have to go through all of these terrible diseases that we assume will just happen to us eventually because of old age, and that old age can be a beautiful, peaceful, enjoyable thing.
Well, that's true. And that's, when I started doing this work, I thought incorrectly, as it turned out, that the younger patients who had less severe disease would do better, but I was wrong. It wasn't how old they were. It wasn't how sick they were. It was simply a function of the more they changed their lifestyle, the more they improved in every way we can measure, in every disease we've studied. And so my new book that I wrote with my lovely wife, Anne, which is called Undo It, is the synthesis of 40 years of work that we've done that to reduce it down to its essence. It's not that hard. Eat well, move more, stress less, love more. Boom, that's it. And my favorite key on the computer, the other reason we called it Undo It, is not only an homage to the Swami, but also my favorite key on the computer has always been the undo button. I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we had something in our own lives? And now we do. It begins with a quote from Albert Einstein that is one of my favorite that says, if you can't make it simple, you don't understand it well enough. And so we're trying to reduce it down to its essence. It's not that hard. And I present a radically new unifying theory that ties all of this together. When I was in medical school, like all doctors, I was trained that heart disease is a different disease than diabetes or high cholesterol or hypertension or prostate cancer or Alzheimer's or whatever. And what this theory says is that they're really not. They're really the same disease masquerading and manifesting in different ways because they all share the same underlying biological mechanisms: chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, changes in the microbiome, and telomeres, and gene expression, and angiogenesis, and so on. And each one of these mechanisms is directly influenced by what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, and how much love and support we have. And the more diseases we study and the more mechanisms we look at, the more reasons we have to explain why these simple changes are so powerful. And it helps explain why people often have more than one of these conditions at the same time. They'll have often high cholesterol and high blood pressure and be overweight and have heart disease. Or in countries like China, where until 50 or 60 years ago, they tended to eat essentially a plant-based diet, had strong communities, managed stress more effectively, and exercised. They had very, very low rates of all these chronic diseases. But when they start to eat like us and live like us, they die like us. And in one generation, they go from one of the lowest to the highest rates of these chronic diseases. So it's not our genes, it's the expression of these genes, which are directly influenced by what we eat. And having done, been in so many debates with Dr. Atkins and people like that, I just decided, I'm done with that. We have 40 years of studies published in peer-reviewed journals, way more than anybody on the planet in terms of proving the power of this approach. And it's saying, look, here's what it is. It's not that hard, and it works. And to the degree that you make these changes, you're going to feel better, look better, and if you follow the program closely enough, in all likelihood, reverse chronic diseases. And under your doctor's supervision, you may be able to reduce or even get off of medications that, in all likelihood, like cholesterol-lowering drugs and blood pressure meds and diabetes medications and so on, that you may have been told that you had to take forever. Under your doctor's care, if you make these changes and, again, treat the cause, turn off the faucet around the sink that's overflowing instead of just mopping up the floor, our bodies have this remarkable capacity in many cases to begin healing, and much more quickly than we had once realized, if we can make these lifestyle changes, which are really the cause. And this is a field that I helped create called lifestyle medicine, which is using lifestyle changes not only to help prevent disease, but to treat it and often reverse it, sometimes in combination with drugs and surgery and often as a direct alternative to them.
And we love lifestyle medicine. It's something that we've encompassed into, all of those areas into our own coaching when we're working with people. Our biggest goal here at Plant Trainers is we found the plant-based lifestyle because Adam had a tumor. He had heart disease. They thought he had a genetic disease, and we needed to figure out why this was happening and how do we keep it from taking him from us. How do we get to the grassroots? How do we get people to start getting on board before they're pre-diabetic, so they're trying to prevent diabetes, or before they're actually diabetic or have a heart attack and need to make a lifestyle change? How do we get to those younger people?
There's so much more great information coming your way, but before we get to that,
the Plant Trainers podcast is free. and it will always be free. And we are so delighted to bring it to you every single week. But there's costs associated with it. For example, we have hosting fees and our time. How many hours a week do you think you put into this podcast?
I don't know, 3, 5,
So you
6,
edit it,
it depends.
You make images to go with it. There's lots of things that you put out there. I'm reaching out to people all the time, making sure that they're committed, making sure that the show notes are ready, making sure we have questions ready. Probably 10 to 15 hours a week or per show that go into creating this podcast for you. So if we were in person, I guess we'd say right now we're holding out our tip jar. And if you look on internet, you could find some really cool little tip jars like tips. They're like hugs without the awkward body contact. Or tips. Tip me, please, so I could send my cat to Buddha school or ninja school. All these cute little things. But Patreon takes that away. Basically, what Patreon is a way for you to leave a little tip saying, hey, thanks for the amazing job you're doing. Help us cover some of those costs that come along with the podcast. And you can help tip us by going to
patreon.com/planttrainers.
And we really do appreciate everyone who has done that before. And there's some perks that go with it. So make sure you check it out.
And now back to the show.
Well, I think in a number of ways. If it's meaningful, it's sustainable. And so it's so easy. And I was on Danielle Bellardo's podcast, which is mainly to millennials, and they got a huge response. It actually went to number 1 on iTunes. It was her very first podcast because so many millennials were really excited by the idea that, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed. Like, what can I do as one person about global warming or feeding the hungry and so on? And when you realize that something as primal as what you put in your mouth every meal can free up resources to reduce global warming, as we talked about earlier, or to feed the hungry, it imbues those choices with meaning. And if it's meaningful, then it's sustainable. Another thing is that if it's pleasurable, it's sustainable. And one of the things that I talk about in our new book is how dynamic these underlying biological mechanisms are. It's not about fear of dying is not a very powerful motivator in any sphere of influence. And we're seeing that in the political world now. Fear is a great motivator for like a month or two after you've been diagnosed with, as Adam was, with a life-threatening condition or whatever. But even then it's hard to sustain because, we all know we're going to die someday. It's just not something we think about most of the time. And so the denial comes back very quickly. But joy and pleasure and love and feeling good and meaning are very sustainable. And so when you can help people connect the dots between what they do and how they feel and what they do and the impact on the planet, James Cameron became a vegan, the legendary filmmaker, about 9 years ago, he and his wife Susie, because in addition to doing all these great films like Avatar and Terminator and Titanic and so on, he's an explorer, and he realized that global warming is really, just around the corner in terms of it reaching a tipping point. And so when he learned that more global warming was caused by eating livestock than all forms of transportation combined, he made this wonderful film with Luis Hoyos, who got an Academy Award for his very first documentary called The Cove, which you might have seen about the dolphin slaughter in Japan. And so they made a film called Game Changers, which is to dispel the most common misconceptions about eating a plant-based diet, which is you're a wimp and you don't get enough protein, by having all these elite athletes raise their game by going on a plant-based diet and winning, Olympic medals and NFL championships and, mixed martial artist national championships, heavyweight boxing championships, really powerful athletes doing that. And there's a great, and so the film was, I'm the main medical expert in the film. And so we got to go to Sundance last year and it premiered there, and hopefully it'll come out in the next few months. They've still been working out, the contractual stuff, but I think it'll be out soon. But there's this one scene in there with these 3 elite athletes in their mid-20s, these 3 guys, like probably 25 years old, obviously in phenomenal shape. And they gave them a single meat-based meal, and it was organic chicken or grass-fed beef, all the usual nonsense about like that's good for you. And just gave them one meat-based meal. And then they measured using this device that went around their penis at night. It's a natural function for guys to have erections when they sleep. And so they measured the frequency and the duration and the hardness of their erections at night when they slept. Then they did the same thing the next day, but they gave them a single plant-based meal. It looked very much the same. It was like a burrito, but it was all vegan. And then they measured it again. And of the 3 guys, all 3 of them showed a 300 to 500% increase in the frequency of their erections at night, and a 10 to 15% increase in the hardness of their erections. Apparently, the film crew became vegan after shooting this scene. And it's just a way of saying, look, your brain gets more blood. You think more clearly. You have more energy when you eat a plant-based diet. You can actually grow some new brain neurons. Your brain gets measurably bigger, particularly the part of your brain called the hippocampus that controls memory, which is what, as people get older, people say, like, what was that guy's name? And where did I leave my keys? And so on. A lot of that may be reversible. Your skin gets more blood, so you look 10 or 20 years younger. Your heart gets more blood. We showed for the first time you can actually reverse heart disease. Your sexual organs get more blood flow in the way we've been talking about. And so when you can help people connect the dots between what they do and how they feel and the quality of their life, you look better, you taste better. I for years I was trying to get one of the big food companies to do a very edgy line of commercials that when you eat healthier, you taste better, when you're with your lover, and all the various things, just to really make it real and here and now, and not just preventing, telling somebody you're going to live to be 86 instead of 85 doesn't really motivate most people, even when they're 85. But telling somebody that they're going to look younger, they're going to feel better, they're going to have more energy, they're going to be less depressed, their sexual function is going to improve, they can get off many of these medications if they are on them or avoid them in the first place, that they can make a difference in, what's good for you is good for the planet, what's personally sustainable is globally sustainable. Those are the kinds of things that put it in the here and now and help people connect the dots between what they do and how they feel. And to realize that, we're always making choices. And if what you gain is more than what you give up and quickly, then those choices are sustainable because it's not about fear, it's about pleasure and joy and meaning. And that's really what makes it work.
So it's not just about, how are we going to make those millennials or how are we going to make, the younger generations. It's whichever generation we're looking at, we need to see what's important to them and make that connection there.
And I think it's important to everyone, really. I mean, at any age. I mean, Viktor Frankl wrote a wonderful book 50 years ago called Man's Search for Meaning, which was looking at people who survived concentration camps in World War II, the ultimate stressful experience. And they found that it wasn't the strongest or the healthiest. It was the ones who had the strongest sense of meaning and purpose, that I've got to survive so that I can, whatever, be reunited with my loved ones or write a book or bear witness, or whatever it happened to be. And so one of the things my wife, Anne, talks about in the book is we often ask our patients, why are you here? Oh, I want to live longer. She'll say, well, why do you want to live longer? They say, gosh, no one's ever asked me that before. We live in the San Francisco area, the tech mecca, and everybody's trying to live forever. And Steve Jobs was one of my closest friends for 20 years before he died, and he gave this wonderful commencement address at Stanford towards the end of his life, talking about how death is really what brings meaning into our lives. And when you can help people get in touch with that sense of meaning and purpose, like, why do you want to live longer? Well, let me think about that. Well, gosh, people say things like, I want to watch my kids grow up. I want to dance at their wedding. I want to make love with my partner. I want to write a book. I want to do a podcast like you're doing. I want to make a difference in people's lives. I want to taste what a delicious plant-based meal is like, whatever it happens to be for that person. I learned, again, that I could take all the meaning out of something and it almost killed me. But I also learned that by helping people connect the dots between what is really meaningful for them and what they do, and that imbues each of those choices with meaning. I mean, for example, all religions and all spiritual paths just about have some kind of dietary guidelines, and they're often in conflict with each other. One religion you can eat this, but not that, or certain days of the week, or certain times a day, or certain months of the year, whatever. It's like, is God confused? I don't know. But what I do know is that whatever the intrinsic benefit of not eating certain foods, just the act of choosing not to eat something that you otherwise could be eating, whatever the intrinsic benefit, imbues those choices with meaning. And for example, especially in the Bay Area, there's this all polyamory and have sex with as many different people as you can, and it's not a judgment. I think many people have experimented with that and found that you can dig a lot of shallow wells and not reach the wellspring, or you can one deep one and reach it. And that by consciously choosing to only have sex with one person, is that boring? Is that the ball and chain? Well, it can be, but it can also be, a recognition that when two people voluntarily choose to just be with each other, it imbues it allows them to feel safe. And when you feel safe, you can open your heart to each other. And because you can only be intimate to the degree you can be vulnerable emotionally, you can only do that to the degree you feel safe. And the more intimate you are, the more erotic it becomes. And so instead of having the same kind of experiences with different people, my wife and I find that, after more than 20 years together, we have the most amazingly erotic experiences that are far beyond anything I've ever even read about, much less experienced. And often orders of magnitude better than anything we've ever experienced on a regular basis. I just had no idea. And it kind of goes back into the category that what you gain is so much more than what you give up. It takes it out of the realm of is this a moral issue? No. Is this the way that to lead the most pleasurable life? At least for us, it has been, just by choosing to eat a plant-based diet. Is that a deprivation? Am I going to live longer? Is it just going to seem longer? All those kind of cliches that you hear. Well, it can be. Or it can be something that's incredibly beautiful. You're, helping, having hotter sex in a cooler planet. You're imbuing all these choices with meaning, and you can eat delicious food all at the same time and feed the hungry. So, what can be better than that?
I want to step back to what you said before when you said finding meaning in something that you're going to do and really finding something that you like to do to make it last. And that's something we talk about when we talk about fitness all the time. And what I wanted to mention about that was that you brought up Game Changers, which is going to, I think, make a huge impact on the younger population because they're going to be able to relate to these athletes. And there are so many more athletes becoming plant-based and becoming public about it, which is already making an impact with the younger population.
Yeah.
And once they have those role models to look up to, and they're more aware of it, they're going to be more interested in giving those things a try. When they see the results for themselves, it's going to be a no-brainer. There's such an impact that it's going to make, and I really can't wait for that film to come out to the public.
Well, that's why in my book, the new book that I have, Undo It, I have quotes from Beyonce, who she and Jay-Z have been mostly vegan, and Blake Lively, and Barbra Streisand, and all these, and James Cameron and his wife Susie. I wrote the foreword to Susie's book about saying just eat vegan one meal a day. Just start where you are, and then as you begin to feel better, you'll get into a virtuous cycle, which will make you want to do even more and more.
And then it's not just about eating. You've talked about moving more, stress less, and love more. And I think love is something that we don't see come up very often when we see other doctors practicing lifestyle medicine. That's a little bit unique.
Well, not just with doctors practicing lifestyle medicine, doctors of any kind. Love is one of those four-letter words that, we're not allowed to talk about very much. I think I gave the first lecture on love. Kim Williams is a good friend was the president of the American College of Cardiology a few years ago, and he found that his own cholesterol level was really high, didn't want to go on statins the rest of his life, did a research review, came across our work, went on my diet and lifestyle program. His cholesterol came down by 50%. And so he had one of the very first seminar on lifestyle medicine at the American College of Cardiology's annual meeting. And I gave what may have been the first lecture ever there on the power of love, which is kind of ironic because, of course, in the cardiology community, the heart is the symbol of love. But it's not okay to talk about that. It's like too touchy-feely. And, and early when I started doing this work, people would say, oh, your program is so touchy-feely. And I get really defensive and say, oh, no, it's very hard science. Look at our quantitative arteriograms and our radionuclide ventriculograms and our, spec Valium scans and, telomeres and whatever. And then one day I thought, you know what? It is touchy-feely. It is a love. Because we are touchy-feely creatures. We're creatures of community. That's how we've survived as a species. And I wrote a book years ago that reviewed what were then hundreds and now literally tens of thousands of studies, which I talk about in the new book, that people who are lonely and depressed are 3 to 10 times more likely to get sick and die prematurely from virtually all causes when compared to those who have a sense of love and connection and community. And I don't know anything in medicine that has that powerful an impact, indirectly and indirectly, because, in doing these studies, I'd ask people, because in the first study, we lived together for a month at a time. We got to know each other really well. And I'd say, teach me something. Why do you smoke? Why do you overeat? Why do you drink too much? Why do you work too hard? Why do you abuse substances? Why do you play so many video games? These behaviors seem so maladaptive to me. And they'd say, you don't get it, Dean. You don't have a clue. These behaviors aren't maladaptive. They're very adaptive because they help us deal with our pain, our loneliness, our depression. 50 or 60 years ago, most people had an extended family they saw regularly. They had a job that felt secure that they'd been at for many years and knew their coworkers. They had a neighborhood with 2 or 3 generations of people that lived together and grew up together in a church or a synagogue or a club that they went to regularly. And many people today don't have any of those things. And Facebook is not a real intimacy. It's a false intimacy. But even that there's such a craving for this primal need for intimacy. This 2.5 billion people are on Facebook. But one of the studies I cite in my new book, and Undo It, is that the more time you spend on Facebook, the more depressed you are, because it looks like everybody has this perfect life but you. Because people don't, in a true, authentic intimacy, like if you grow up in a neighborhood with 2 or 3 generations of people, they know you. They don't just know your bio sketch or your Facebook profile. They know where you messed up. They know your demons and your dark side, and you know that they know, and they know that you know that they know, and they're still there for you. And there's just something very primal about the need to really be seen, and to mention James Cameron again, in Avatar is that wonderful "I see you," all of you, which is really from an African proverb. And to be seen fully, warts and all, is what we do in our support groups, which are not support groups in the sense of helping people stay on the diet. They're a place where people can feel safe enough to let down their emotional defenses, to talk openly and authentically about what's really going on in their lives without fear that someone's going to judge them or criticize them or reject them or abandon them or give them glib advice or whatever, but to just listen and to focus on their feelings and express those feelings, which is really what connects us. And it's the part of my program that people often have the most skepticism about, but universally it's the one that is the most meaningful because, again, it's something that many people don't have in their lives. They say things like, I've got 20 friends in this pack of cigarettes and they're always there for me and nobody else is. You're going to take away my 20 friends? What are you going to give me? Or I use food to fill the void, or fat coats my nerves and numbs the pain, or opioids numb the pain, or too much alcohol numbs the pain, or other drugs numb the pain, or video games numb the pain, or working all the time is a more socially acceptable way of distracting yourself from your pain. And so what I learned from the Swami years ago is that the pain is not the problem. The pain's the messenger. It's saying, hey, listen up, pay attention. You're not doing something that's in your best interest. And, when people can stop kind of literally or figuratively bypassing their pain and say, okay, what am I doing that's causing this pain? Not to blame yourself, but to empower yourself. Again, it's like people say, oh, I've just got bad genes. What can I do? And say, well, actually, you can do a lot. You can turn off the bad genes and turn on the good genes. We found over 500 genes were changed in just 3 months when people went on our program. Again, not to blame, but to empower. Then the pain becomes a catalyst for transformation. I mean, for me, it was becoming suicidally depressed. For Adam, I imagine for you going through your horrible experience, not that you'd wish it on anybody, but having gone through it, I'm curious to know, how did that transform you in ways that enable you to do this amazing work that you and Shoshana are doing now?
Well, for me, it was, I have a tumor on my kidney and they're telling me I'm not going to live past the age of 40. And then I learned that I might have VHL. And then I learned that I have the beginning stages of heart disease. And I start picturing Shush and the kids growing up without a father. And that was the motivation that had me research into how I could find ways to change my life without them removing a kidney from my body or having to go on medication. I just didn't want to go down that path. And luckily I came across all the research from you and Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. T. Colin Campbell and Forks Over Knives. And I ran into people like Brendan Brazier and Rich Roll, and all those influencers came into my life, which helped me find the path that brought me to where I am right now. And I'm 44. I'm long past the 40 that they told me I wouldn't see, and I'm feeling better than ever, in the best shape of my life, and I'm thriving. And it's because I made a lot of the simple lifestyle changes that you talk about in your book, and I've been able to apply them to my life.
Well, so that's exactly what we're talking about here, and that's very inspiring to hear. And so what I tried to do in this book, what Ann and I tried to do, and I think we did it reasonably well, is to help people see the experience of suffering not as a punishment or as this horrible, whatever, but rather, it's horrible, but there it is. What can you do about it? And it gets our attention. Pain is a way of getting our attention. The Swami used to say, look, if someone gives you a really hot, plate to hold on to, you let go of it. You don't have to say, well, I wonder if I should let go of this plate or not. It's like, okay, that's too hot. I'm going to let go of it. But, as a doctor, I wasn't trained to help people use the experience of suffering or being diagnosed with an illness or pain as a doorway. I was trained to kill it, to numb it, to bypass it, whatever, and to say, okay, nobody looks for pain, but sometimes there it is. What can we do about that? And so now the book really says, okay, here's what you can do about that to transform pain and suffering into joy and into healing in many cases. Just before I forget, just show how powerful these changes are. I think that's one of the big obstacles, is that people think it has to be a new drug, a new laser, something really high-tech and expensive to be powerful. And I think our unique contribution has been to use these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art scientific measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be. 86% of the $3.6 trillion we spend each year in the U.S. on healthcare, which is mostly sick care, are for treating chronic diseases that can be largely prevented or reversed by changing lifestyle. So that would free up trillions of dollars to make better care available to more people at lower cost, and the only side effects are good ones. And I gave an example in our new book of a guy who was a doctor himself, had such bad heart disease, and that he was told the only thing that they could offer was a new heart, a heart transplant. And while waiting to find a donor, he went through our program at UCLA in Los Angeles, and 9 weeks later, his heart improved so much he didn't need a heart transplant anymore. We have over a dozen cases like that. What's the more radical intervention, a heart transplant or eat well, move more, stress less, love more? Not to mention the fact that it saves the insurance company, $1.5 million per patient who can avoid that. And it's why after 16 years, Medicare is now covering my program for reversing heart disease in hospitals and clinics and physician groups around the country. And most insurance companies are as well. So if you have heart disease, go to our website, which is at ornish.com, and it lists all the sites that are offering our program. And I didn't want this just to be concierge medicine. Having seen what a powerful difference these changes can make, I wanted it to be available to everyone, and now it is.
And I think the key here is that it's not just the heart surgery that unblocks the blockage. It's life. You're changing your lifestyle, which will allow you to then have a deeper meaning of why. Why do you want this disease to go away? Why do you want to live? And give you that energy to be able to do all of the things that Undo It encompasses.
That's right. Because it's what gets me out of bed every day. Is this like what brings a sense of meaning and joy and pleasure into your life, into my life? And for me, it's about service. It's about being healthy so I can enjoy my 9-year-old girl and my 18-year-old son and my lovely wife, and we can, do all the things that make life joyful and pleasurable and meaningful. And so getting in touch with what brings you that sense of pleasure and joy and meaning in your life provides the energy to go out and heal if you need to do that. But, in some kind of mystical way, I think that when you truly commit to something or someone, the universe conspires to help you achieve that in ways that I can't fully explain. But I've seen it over and over again in my life and the lives of other people as well. And the reason that I spend so much time doing medical research, which most people don't do even in the lifestyle medicine movement, is because awareness is the first step in healing, and research can be a very powerful way of increasing awareness and to say to someone, look, if you're willing to make these changes in lifestyle, there's a good chance that you can actually reverse as well as prevent so many of these chronic diseases, because again, they're all the same disease, just manifesting in different masquerades, but they all come from the same biological mechanisms, which are directly influenced by eat well, move more, stress less, and love more.
I remember talking to Dr. Michael Greger about his book, How Not to Die, and how that was an encyclopedia that everybody needed to get their hands on. I think your book, Undo It, How Simple Lifestyle Changes Can Reverse Most Chronic Diseases, is one of those books that everybody needs to get their hands on, because these simple lifestyle changes, as you say, eat well, move more, stress less, love more, they're really not that difficult to do. And with people armed with that knowledge of how to execute, they're just going to improve their quality of life, which is something we talk about all the time, so much easier and so much more effectively. So we're going to put a link to your book in our show notes. And you mentioned your website before. We'll put a link to that as well. Is there anywhere that else people can go to reach out and connect with you?
Well, on the website, it links the hospitals and clinics that we've trained. So that's a good place to do it. And if you happen to have Alzheimer's disease and you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and you're interested in, or know someone who's interested in, we're still recruiting people. It's all done for free to the people who are involved in it. Just go to the homepage of Ornish.com, and there's a link to our nonprofit institute and a description of the study. We'd love to work with you if you're eligible for it.
Before we let you go, you mentioned your children, your 18-year-old and your 9-year-old. I wanted to know how they encompass these 4 areas.
Well, they're both very old souls, is the only way I can put it. They've been, it was apparent from the moment they first came into this world. My 18-year-old ate a plant-based diet until he was about 15, and he said, "Dad, I'm about to be a teenager. I am a teenager. I got to rebel. I got to individuate from you. I can eat meat or start shooting heroin. What would you prefer?" I said, "Good. That's a good choice."
Smart boy. Yeah.
and so part of what I've learned is that even more than being healthy, people need to feel free and in control. And as soon as I tell somebody, even when he was little, I said, nobody can tell you what to eat, not even me, and I'm your dad. And this is when he was 2 or 3 and just starting to solid food. I said, your body's your temple and you control it. We eat plant-based. This is why. But if you don't like it, we'll make something else for you. And so, but he was plant-based until he was about 14 or 15. And then he decided he would become a carnivore. And I said, fine, if that's what you want to do. And then recently he's become plant-based again because, he could freely choose to do that. I know that he's a very strong-willed young man. I don't know where he gets that from, but I know that if I'd said, oh, no, you have to eat this way, then, he would never have become plant-based. And so I see this all the time. Sometimes when I lecture, I say, the very first dietary intervention when God said, don't eat the apple, and that was God talking. That didn't go so well, and, apples are good for you. So the lesson there to me is that, and even when he would have a meltdown when he was 3 years old, I'd say, what's going on? You go, rah, 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 rah. I say, well, how long do you need to be upset? I go, 2 minutes. Okay, come back in 2 minutes. It's like not trying to tell him that his feelings were wrong, but rather to try to engage him and flow with that. And so, and our 9-year-old girl is likewise. She's been plant-based since she was born, and still is. And they're both just such bright lights. In fact, my son's name is Lucas because when he was first born, we didn't know what to call him, and he would literally fill up the room with light, and Lucas means bringer of light. And our daughter is Jasmine, but she's really Jazz, our jazzy girl. Mm-hmm. She's such a jazzy girl, loves to perform, and it's like having Robin Williams as your daughter. She's constantly doing improv. It's really, it's just such a great joy. I can't even begin to express it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We wanted to thank you so much for all of the work that you do, for taking the time with us today to educate, engage, and inspire our listeners. And we wish you the best of luck. And again, we recommend that everybody go ahead and get their copy of Undo It. And they could find everything that we talked about today on the website at planttrainers.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers Podcast. We want to make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform.
We really appreciate the feedback we receive from you every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans. It really helps other people find us just like you did.
Thanks so much to our patrons. To become a patron, visit us at patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference in the quality of the show.
And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at planttrainers.com for awesome recipes, a list of our services, and of course, our latest podcast.
We encourage you to email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so that we can help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
So we hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day. Or is that too corny?
It's a little cheesy.